Well, here we are, another edition of Zach Harris Sports Football Wednesdays. We are one day away from preseason football kickoff, the Hall of Fame game tomorrow. It's going to be a great matchup between some backups. I don't expect to see the starters too much, but still, nonetheless, missed football. And then guess what? By the end of the first quarter, they're going to be like, why did I even bother watching this? But nonetheless, it's still football, no matter how bad the performance may be tomorrow. But we're not here to talk about tomorrow's performance. We're here to talk football. Joining me, my right hand man, Ryan. Thank you for coming back to the show. I know I try to drive you away with my Giants hate, but you keep coming back.
I am back to once again talk a little NFL football. We're about 23 hours away from the first preseason game of the year. If you need something to entice you to get you to watch that game, it's a couple of guys who are going to probably have their only chance to live out the dream of playing in an NFL game, and you never know who might show up. Giants fans will remember a wide receiver by the name of Victor Cruz who made quite the splash in the preseason. Never know what you might see, and heck, preseason football's a lot better than no football. I'll damn sure take it. What do you think, Zach?
And you hit the nail right on the head because my avatar for the day is Paul Turner. For Eagles fans out there, you know who Paul Turner is. 2016, he lit up the preseason. He had like 17 catches for nearly 200 yards. Was an unsung hero that preseason. Ended up making the roster. Played a handful of games. Had a handful of catches during the season. Never to be heard of again. So my point being is don't get too high, don't get too low. Yeah, there's storylines. You know why? Because everybody's happy the NFL is back. We need something to write about. So you're going to hear about this guy throwing 3 interceptions in one preseason or this guy throwing 3 interceptions in a training camp. You know what? Training camps and preseason are specifically to get a feel for not only your teammates, but for yourself, the offense, what you can get away with, what you can't get away with. So don't get too high, don't get too low, because there's preseason unsung heroes, there's preseason disasters. One of the ones that I want to talk about real quickly before we get into the rest of our show is, you hear things out there like Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz and Daniel Jones having like these horrible training camp days. Don't get too high, don't get too low. These guys are learning new offenses or have new teammates, and they're kind of just testing the waters when it doesn't count. Would you rather them test the waters in practice, or would you rather test the waters during an NFL game? These guys need to get used to and acclimated with their teammates. They need to realize how quick teams are and what they can get away with, what they can't get away with. It's literally made for mistakes, and that's why people don't yell at athletes during training camps. This is a teaching experience. All right, you threw 3 interceptions. Well, if you throw 3 more tomorrow, then I got to teach you can't do this anymore. But if you threw 3 today and then the next day you had a clean practice, that's what I want to see. I want to see you learning from that. Do you have anything else to add to that, Ryan, before we move on to the bulk of our conversation?
Said the key word right there, Zach. Practice. These guys are at practice. You can make mistakes during practice. We're about 30 odd days, 36 to be exact, away from the start of week one. Let the guys make mistakes in practice. It's not a big deal. I don't know. I wouldn't. It's fun to watch like the highlight plays during practice, but I'm not going to get worked up. I'll get worked up when we look bad week one, but for right now, I'm just excited to get whatever news I can. That's my take on it. Let's move on.
All right. So before we get into our NFC power rankings, our top 10 teams, we did the AFC a couple weeks ago. We're traveling back to the NFC now. Before we get in there, I want to have a couple announcements. First of all, happy birthday to Tom Brady, number 45. 45 years old, still playing like he's 25 years old. So happy birthday to Tom Brady. Second of all, I know this is a football show, but these are two respective legends. Rest in peace, Bill Russell, Vince Scully. Two of the best at their specific situations. One of the greatest Mr. Championship himself, Bill Russell, and then one of the most memorable voices that you'll ever hear, Vince Scully. And then speaking of play-by-play guys, I want to give an extra special shout out to the voice of Alabama, Roll Tide, Eli Gold, who may miss most of the season, if not all the season, due to health concerns. So hope he gets better. And then lastly, but not leastly, John Mechie, the wide receiver for the Texans, another Alabama guy, dealing with, a disease that doesn't care what nationality you are, whether you're rich, you're poor, cancer. It's tough. It takes everybody has dealt with cancer in one way or another, whether it's a brother, a friend, a sister, doesn't matter. We've all had people that have dealt with this cancer situation. So, John Mechie, take the time, get right. At least, you got a curable cancer, but don't take that for granted, because I've heard those words in my personal life and my personal experience with my mother-in-law, and things did not turn out so well. So don't take it for granted. Do what you need to do, get healthy, and we look forward to seeing you back. With all that being said, let's get into our NFC power rankings. Ryan, like always, ladies first. Go ahead. You got the board.
If you want to be the man, you've got to beat the man. As far as I'm concerned, the Rams are still number one. F them picks. I still like the roster they have in place. I think Matt Stafford's going to be better having another year under Sean McVay. Cooper Kupp's still there. It's pretty much all I need to put them at number one on my list. Zach, what say you?
You know what? I couldn't agree with you more. Number one on my list has to be the Los Angeles Rams. When you win the Super Bowl, you got to go in as the reigning Super Bowl champs, and that's what they're doing. They're going in as the reigning Super Bowl champs. The one thing that worries me is you are no longer just one of the teams. You are the team to beat. If you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And the Rams will have a target on their back all season. But one of the good things to look at, even though they lost Von Miller and potentially OBJ hasn't signed back yet, they traded away Robert Woods. They added Allen Robinson, Bobby Wagner, and Kyron Williams, the running back from Notre Dame, who I'm really high on. This is a strong running back group. You also got year number 2 of Matt Stafford and the Sean McVay offense. We all know what happens in year 2. You tend to light it up. You don't think as much, and you just go out there and ball out. So we've seen him win a Super Bowl without knowing the offense as well as he could have. Imagine what we're going to get in this year with Sean McVay, Matt Stafford. Now that they know each other, they know what works, what doesn't work. They know the offense. They can just go out there and ball out. And then Allen Robinson mixed with Cooper Kupp, that is probably the best 1-2 combination in NFL, arguably. But I would say we are going to learn a lot more than Allen Robinson, more than you have in his previous career, because I'm telling you, this kid's talented. He can run routes. He can high point the ball. He can go up and get 50-50 balls. Just think of a bigger, taller, stronger Cooper Kupp. I'm telling you, you will learn a lot about Allen Robinson this year. I'm very excited for this Rams team.
It's an exciting Rams team. The pieces they lost, I would argue, aren't their most important pieces. Every single team in the NFL can do better than they did last season, except the Rams. The other interesting, I wouldn't so much call it an addition, but something to keep an eye on. If you remember back to last year during preseason, they did lose Cam Akers very early. They lost him. Devastating news when that broke. I'd be interested to see what the team looks like if they stay healthy for an entire year, when they have that opportunity to gel together, to have some consistency in that roster. You remember they also lost Robert Woods last season. Let's see what they do. If they can stay healthy, dare I say they might be better than last year. Right? They have the potential to. It's not like an extra year in this system is going to hurt. And I can't forget, Sean McVay is a damn fine coach. I think we can start saying that now. He's up there, man. When you look at NFL coaches, he's probably pretty close to the top of the list. The Rams, Zach, I think we both agree on this. It was the easy pick, right? How much time did you spend thinking about this? 10 seconds?
Not even 10 seconds. As soon as I wrote number 1, I put Rams right next to it. I didn't even think about it. It just automatic. Now, our number 2s may vary, but I'm thinking they won't. I think it's after 2 is when we get a little funky, specifically me, because I have more going on potential for this season rather than what I've seen in the past. But let's start off with number 2. I think we may both have the same team, but I'm going to let you lead off again.
Well, when you set out to do a power rankings pretty close to the top of your conference list, you have to put whatever team Tom Brady plays on, and that's what I've done here. I think Bucks are my number 2. Tom Brady's still there. That's a pretty big plus. I'm interested to see what happens now with Todd Bowles' head coach. I had the impression towards the end of last season that Bruce Arians was more of a hindrance to that team, if anything, not because of who he is as an actual coach, but just I didn't get the impression that maybe the entire team was gelling with him. I don't know what gave it away. It might have been Antonio Brown stripping on the sideline and walking out. You know, I'm no expert, but I certainly don't do that when things are going well at work. No judgment, though. It felt like a team that had a little bit of behind-the-scenes chaos. It's very odd that Tom Brady comes back and Bruce Arians immediately steps away. Let's see what they do now. New head coach. I still like the pieces they have in place solely because of the man they have at quarterback. Big 45 today. Let's see what they can do moving forward. Let's not forget who knocked them off. It was the Rams. It's not like they lost to some, bottom-tier team. I'm still keeping the Bucks pretty high. Zach, who do you have number 2?
Well, like I said, I thought we would have the same 1-2 combination, and indeed I was right. I have the Buccaneers number 2 as well. Number 1, because they have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and they added Logan Ryan, a very good veteran piece on that defensive side of the ball. They'll be more healthy on the defensive side of the ball. Offensive line, not so much. But I've learned, if anything, in these last 20 plus years, is do not bet against Tom Brady. Love him, hate him. Do not make the mistake of betting against him. And you know what? Obviously, the Buccaneers believed in him. They brought all those pieces back. They brought back Leonard Fournette, among others. And then they went out and added Russell Gage, who was one of my most underrated wide receivers last year with the Atlanta Falcons. I think he didn't get enough presence in that offense last year. This guy is probably the best number 3 wide receiver that you'll get in the whole entire NFL, especially when he gets to play with Tom Brady, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans. All he needs to do is just be there as the third option, and he's going to be one of the best third options there. And then, losing Gronk, anytime you lose a Hall of Fame tight end, that is rough. They do have some talent there, and they go ahead and they add Kyle Rudolph. For whatever reason, he didn't really work with the Giants last year. I was looking forward to seeing what he would do with the Giants, kind of give that security blanket to Daniel Jones. I just think the offense wasn't gelling there, whether it was Daniel Jones, offensive coordinator, the chaos between all of that. But Kyle Rudolph is a surefire underneath blanket guy on a third down. If you need a big third down catch, that's your man. Kyle Rudolph, while he may not get 30, 40 catches, the catches that he does get are going to be very important to moving this chains. And the Buccaneers, dare I say it, are going to be better than they were last year.
I think when you look at the Kyle Rudolph situation, it's really easy to just look at it in terms of this. When you look at coordinators, I would definitely take Byron Leftwich over Jason Garrett. That feels like a no-brainer to me. This might be controversial, but Tom Brady might be a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. Time will tell. If somebody is going to be able to squeeze every last drop of juice that Rudolph has left, it's going to be Brady. That team, to me, as long as Tom Brady's quarterback, they're going to get the most out of whatever pieces they have, whether that be a tight end, offensive line, hell, even the defense. So you can't ignore them at number 2. I think they play in a pretty weak division. We'll see them come January, February time, I think. Now, this is the part, Zach, I think, where we're going to have some interesting conversation. Because I'm telling you right now, I would be shocked if you had the same 3, 4, or 5 team as me.
I can almost guarantee you that my number 3 team is probably not even in your top 5. But go ahead, take the board. Number 3, who do you got?
This is going to hurt us. How about them Cowboys? Woo, how about them Cowboys? So here's the thing about the Cowboys. The weakest part of their team, easily their head coach. easily, in my mind, their head coach. I love the young talent they have on defense, whether that be Parsons, whether that be Diggs. I think they have a very good receiver room. I do like Gallup. I do like CeeDee Lamb. I think there's a lot of noise as far as who their feature back is going to be in the backfield. For as much talk as we might have about Ezekiel Elliott and the amount of money he makes and how he needs to be our feature back, I think you can say those things without necessarily doing those things. You can talk about it without being about it. I would be shocked if we don't see a lot of Tony Pollard, which I think makes this Dallas Cowboy team better. And then as far as the coaching goes, Mike McCarthy might be on his last legs in the NFL. There is a ton of pressure on this man to manage the clock and not commit a million penalties a game, right? You need to have a disciplined team when you have this much talent. You have too much talent. This team has had so much untapped potential, and it feels like the same conversation we always have around the Cowboys. Oh, they're a good team, but they're Cowboys going to Cowboys. They make dumb decisions down the stretch. If you just want to look at it in a microcosm, if you think back to last year during the Thanksgiving game, you couldn't eat a bite of turkey without there being a flag on the field. So if this team can just tighten things up a little bit, they're dangerous. Zach, who do you have number 3?
All right. So when we do our power rankings, whether it's AFC, NFC, NFL, we're supposed to explain why they are in the position we put them in. And for all those reasons that you just explained are exactly the reasons why they are not my third team and they're not even in my top 5. And I'll drop down and get to them later. My number 3 team is the San Francisco 49ers. And I know you may be thinking they're a little high. You know, I had a little bit of a fight with this, but ultimately I came to the decision that I'm going to be based on potential and what I've seen in previous years with that untapped potential on top of it. And what I came to is this is a great defense. They're going to finally have a healthy run game. You know, they don't need Deebo Samuel to be running the ball every single play or every other play. They've drafted another running back. They have a strong running back room. And then you talk about the fact of Trey Lance. You've seen what Jimmy Garoppolo did in this offense where it was all yards about the catch. Trey Lance not only adds that added dimension of being an athlete playing quarterback, he also brings that added dimension of the deep ball. And we've seen it against the Houston Texans. Now, granted, it's the Houston Texans, but just the play calling, the mentality of Kyle Shanahan, who threw more deep balls in that game against the Houston Texans than he did with his whole entire head coaching career with the San Francisco 49ers. So we always talk about Trey Lance and his legs and that added dimension to the offense. Let's not forget that Trey Lance can throw the deep ball. He can throw it with some accuracy, and that's really going to be added as another dimension to this offense. Now, what worries me is can Trey Lance hit the layups? And by the layups, obviously in the NFL, nothing is ever easy, but can he consistently hit those 5 to 10 yard passes, the things that Jimmy Garoppolo did so well, where he hit those 5 yard hitches, the 10-yard in routes, and let the guys take the ball and run with it after the catch. Can Trey Lance do that? If he can do that at least half as well as his predecessor with Jimmy Garoppolo has done, and then add in a dimension of being a running factor and a deep ball thrower, the sky is the limit for this 49ers team. Now, obviously, it's not cool to have the biggest question marks surrounding you at the quarterback position, but that's just an unknown. The question is, what will we get to know about this guy throughout the season? But if you just rely on this defense alone, this defense is a Super Bowl caliber defense. And for that reason, and having Kyle Shanahan, just like we love Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay is from that tree. That's why the 49ers are at my 3rd spot. And with that question mark, if that can get answered with the 49ers this season, sky is the limit.
Zach, you could not be more wrong about having the 49ers at 3. It is obvious to me that the 49ers belong at number 4, which is where I have them in the correct spot. The thing about the 49ers is, and I don't think this can be understated, when you sit down and you formulate an offense, the offense you formulate around Jimmy G it's going to look a lot different than an offense you put together around Trey Lance. When your singular focus is how do we get the most out of Trey Lance, how do we use him along with Deebo Samuel, along with Kittle, and that's something that you can just do in a vacuum without worrying about another guy, I think that's going to make that offense much better. If Deebo Samuel's all in, and he's willing to maybe do, I don't know, some weird stuff with Trey Lance, maybe we see some weird option offense, I think this team could be dangerous. That defense with Bosa is, I don't have a ton of bad things to say about the 49ers because I think they have such upside. Buy low, sell high. That's what I believe about the 49ers. I think you have them exactly one spot too high, but I think they're a great number 4 team. Zach, who do you have number 4?
All right, so I'm going to bring up this comment because if you just waited one more second, I have the Green Bay Packers sitting at number 4. This is a great defense. They added more talent in the draft. You know, these cornerbacks are absolutely amazing. I thought Eric Stokes was taken a little too high last year. Guess what? They proved me wrong. And that is why I'm not a talent evaluator in the NFL, because they nailed it from the Georgia guy. You know, he was the quickest guy. He wasn't necessarily the best guy in Georgia, but he was best for that defense. This defense is absolutely loaded. And then I know there's some question marks at the wide receiver position. I'm going to give you a couple of names to watch out for. Christian Watson, the wide receiver out of North Dakota State. Mari Rodgers, who is now in his second year in the NFL, who didn't have very many touches last year due to a little bit of injury, a little bit of him just learning the playbook. And then the last name I'm going to have you watch out for is the kid from Nevada. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but the kid from Nevada, he's tremendous. He's got great speed. He's got great height. And then that's something that Aaron Rodgers is going to automatically connect with: height and speed. That is perfect for him with the deep ball throws, the 50-50 balls. And then this might be the healthiest offensive line potentially that the Green Bay Packers will have in the last handful of years. So that's why I'm not really worried. And then if they just lean on that run game just a little bit more, now that they realize they have a two-headed monster of A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, the sky is the limit for this Green Bay Packers team. Although they lost a future Hall of Fame wide receiver in Davante Adams, you know, going from one Hall of Fame quarterback to another, you know, there's going to be some adjustments. So same thing for Aaron Rodgers. When he goes from one Hall of Fame wide receiver to another Hall of Fame wide receiver, there's going to be a little bit of adjustment. But ultimately, the Packers, anytime you have an MVP on that team, you have another, you know, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan type of offense there with that head coach there. I love that offense. It makes it easier for quarterbacks, makes it easier for wide receivers, and it just helps the offense flow. So even though you don't have Davante Adams there, I think that's actually going to help Aaron Rodgers, because we saw in the playoff game, he forced it to Davante Adams, he forced it to Aaron Jones. No more. You have all the weapons there. Spread it out through all of them. It's going to force Aaron Rodgers to play outside of just one guy. And I think ultimately that's going to help them throughout the season and then into the postseason.
Sean, great guy. Love you, bud. Packers are not a number 3 team in my mind. This week, I've chosen to go with, for my picture, Nicolas Cage from Con Air, who bears a striking resemblance to Aaron Rodgers, which is fitting because Aaron Rodgers is a criminal. He has held this organization hostage for the past few years. He has a singular focus on me. He has entered the Big Ben stage of his career where he goes on the radio. It's all about him. All eyes on me. I don't need this top-end talent on this team as long as I'm happy. I think we're seeing the downswing of the Packers. Yeah, they got, to your credit, Romeo Doubs out in Nevada. They have a wide receiver room that could honestly, I think, break either way. Alan Lazard, a guy who has shown flashes in my mind of being a guy that you could count on as a guy. But I'm just, at this point, I'm over the Packers. I think their late season playoff push competitive era with Rodgers, I think it's done. I have them in my top 5, but grudgingly, maybe some of this is personal animosity. I'm kind of done with the Packers and everything about them. It's a frustrating team to watch. If you believe some of the stories we've heard about Rodgers in the past, he certainly hasn't shown a ton of respect to the guys he plays with, famously saying about one of his receivers, yeah, come get him. Like, you're not going to stand up for your guy. Like, like Greg Jennings is like right there, man. Like, you're going to stand up for this guy. You're just, hey, go come get him. I don't know. I'm over him. Get rid of him. 49ers 4, Packers 5. That's what I have. Deal with it. Zach, what do you think?
All right, so before I go ahead and talk about my number 5 team, I just want to explain the Greg Jennings situation. This has been talked about in interviews with Greg Jennings. I forget what team specifically they were playing. It was very early in the season, contract year, and Greg Jennings is talking trash with the DB, and the DB's telling Aaron Rodgers, you know what, this guy's talented. Love to have him. I think it was actually the 49ers, to be honest with you. And then Aaron Rodgers is like, you know what? You want him? Come and get him. And that kind of just set the tone for how that season actually played out for Greg Jennings. And we know he did end up moving on, played some years with the Vikings until ultimately just kind of dropped out of the league. Never quite was the same after the injury during that year. But number 5 on my list, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. If you want to call me biased, you can certainly call me biased, but I'm going to explain why. The run game is the number one reason. Two things that travel well in this league: defenses and run games. And when you have those two things, you can win a lot of games. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to win the Super Bowl, but it's definitely a big start to help you win the Super Bowl. Now, the number one question is, when push comes to shove, when it's a third down, it's third and long, and everybody on that field knows you need to throw the ball. Can you make that throw? It's not about just being able to make throws. It's about being able to make throws when everybody on that field knows you need to throw the ball. Can you still find the right place to go with the ball? Can you still complete that pass? That's the question mark. How much does Jalen grow? He has everything that you would want out of a quarterback except that consistent accuracy. If we could see that out of Jalen, he could potentially show the Philadelphia Eagles and its harsh fans that he is the franchise guy. But that still remains to be seen. He needs to show a little bit more because, like you've seen with the Buccaneers playoff game, when the run game wasn't going or when you got behind early, can he throw you back in the game? We've seen too many times where he forced the ball in that game, threw a couple interceptions, threw the ball away a couple of times, was just trying to do too much. Ultimately, where do they fall? And then, Eagles fans, I know the animosity towards Carson Wentz, but if you're going to love him for one thing, love him for the way that he left Philadelphia and teach and taught Howie Roseman a valuable lesson. If you have a young quarterback, go ahead and get him some weapons. And that's absolutely what they did. They drafted Devonta Smith, who was a surefire, everybody thought, a can't-miss prospect coming out of the NFL, a Heisman guy, played at Alabama, the SEC, played in that big, tough, strong, confident conference, and then went on to Philadelphia. You drafted him. You know what? That wasn't enough. We need to revamp our wide receiver group some more. Let's go out and get A.J. Brown, a big, physical wide receiver where you could just give him a little bubble screen. He's going to break tackles. He's going to get you yardage. So by Carson Wentz leaving and the reasons that he left and wanted to leave, taught Howie Roseman, I need to build around my quarterback. I need to get the wide receivers in there. I need to get the weapons in there. I need to build the offensive line. What do? They draft offensive line. They draft wide receiver. They draft a defensive line. And they bring in a big physical wide receiver. And then the last thing, you got 8 men deep on that defensive line. And you probably got about 8 men deep on that offensive line. And if you go back to 2017 when they won the Super Bowl, that was their strength. The offensive line, they dealt with all the injuries that came their way on the offensive line. Same thing with the defensive line. They had a very strong defensive line. So if you're going to travel, you got your running game, you got your defense, you got your offensive line, you got your defensive line. And the only question mark is when push comes to shove, can Jalen make the throws necessary to win the big games? And other than that, if he can answer that question, this team is a Super Bowl contending team.
Zach, once again, you could not be further off base. The Eagles are clearly the number 6 team, which is where I have them ranked. They had a spectacular night one of the NFL draft. I love Jordan Davis. I love the pick when they made it. Getting A.J. Brown felt like such a steal. I thought that was such a huge moment. When you have a young quarterback, let's shore up our defense, make sure we can get pressure up the middle against the opposing quarterback, and we'll get a big-time threat for our quarterback. Let's give him all the support in the world we can to try to make a run at this thing. Also, why don't we go out? We'll get a center from Nebraska. That feels like a no-brainer when they took Cam Jurgens. I think Nakobe Dean in the third round at linebacker was an unsung, very wise pick. Few question marks that I do still have on this team. I think as far as ceilings for quarterbacks that we've talked about so far, Jalen Hurts probably has the lowest ceiling. I think he's got a lot of pressure there in Philadelphia. I don't think I'm saying anything too controversial when I say things can get very ugly very quickly in that city.
Mm-hmm.
You're not really a patient city when things aren't going well, respectfully. I'm not trying to come at you guys, but you're not always the nicest group of fans. I don't know what your beef was with Santa back in the day. You always had some underlying animosity with Wentz, couldn't stop looking at the pretty backup quarterback. Even, Donovan McNabb never had the easiest time there in Philadelphia. You got a bit of a track record for maybe not being the kindest group of people, but I think the Eagles have a chance at winning the NFC East. I have them number 6. I think they got a lot of upside potential. Zach, who managed to grace your list at number 6?
All right, so I think this is going to be the biggest shocker, even bigger than you putting the Dallas Cowboys at number 3. Number 6, I have the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm going to tell you, I do enjoy Kirk Cousins. So I do enjoy Kirk Cousins. I do think the media got a hold of this I don't play well in big games deal, and I think they kind of ran away with it. He's had his ups and downs in big time games, but let's be honest. He can make the big time throws when they're necessary. I think a lot of it had to do in Minnesota. That head coach quarterback combo just did not work. And I think Kirk Cousins did as well as he did in Minnesota, despise the head coach that was there.
Ooh.
Anytime you have a defensive head coach, the one thing that defensive head coaches like to do is they like to worry about their defense. Then they want to have a baller. They want to have a quarterback that can just take care of the offense. Well, guess what? Now you bring in Kevin O'Connell, another Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay type of offensive-minded guy who's going to make things even easier for your quarterback, your big-time quarterback. Not enough discussion around him. Is he elite? Is he borderline elite? And I think this guy is a borderline elite quarterback. Good enough to get you to the big game. He just needed the right kind of offense around him. The pieces around him need to stay healthy. That defense last year, that defense was horrendous. He still did his best with Dalvin Cook missing games, with that defense being as bad as any in the NFL, still managed to keep them competitive and in that playoff race. They fixed the defense. They brought in a lot of new pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Kevin O'Connell, a offensive-friendly guy that's going to make it a lot easier to play quarterback. Justin Jefferson, setting some lofty goals for himself, wants to be known as the best wide receiver when all is said and done this NFL season. I think with him and Thielen, that's one of the best duos out there in the NFL. You got Kevin O'Connell that's really going to be able to game plan and scheme these guys open more than they already get themselves open, which is just going to be absolutely astoundingly amazing. And then obviously, if you can get a healthy Dalvin Cook for full 17-game season and then the playoffs, the sky is the limit for this Vikings team. I know it's a tough task to sit them at number 6 with a rookie head coach that has never done it before, but I have high hopes in this offense. I have high hopes in a veteran quarterback, and guess what? This wide receiver tandem is set to ball off because Thielen has fell off just a little bit, not much, just a little bit, but I think Kevin O'Connell scheming both of these guys open, it's going to be helpful. And then I think this is the year Irv Smith Jr. finally gets noticed as one of the top 15 tight ends in the league.
We've had a little bit of fun with you taking a team and then me taking them right after. This is not going to be that situation here. I have the Vikings a little bit lower, although they still made my list. I actually went Cardinals is my next team after the Eagles. For as much time, and you can go back in the archives and listen to me talk about the Kyler Murray situation. As much as I detest that situation, as much as I'm not a fan of Kyler Murray, and for as bad as this team might be in the second half of every season, we still play a first half of the season. They'll probably look good, and kid's talented enough to get by on talent alone for a couple games. I have them. I have three NFC West teams here. Begrudgingly, you can tell by the sound of my voice, I'm not super enthused about these guys. I took the Cardinals here. They took out the watch some film clause of the contract. Maybe the kid will act right, and this will be enough pressure to get him to screw his head on. Or not. I mean, honestly, if he fails and I can come on the show every week and talk about what a bum he is, I'll chalk it up as a win. I'll gladly eat crow on this pick. But they do come in here just after the Eagles. I took the Cardinals. We're going bird teams. Bird theme.
Well, guess what?
Zach would say it.
Let's stay on that bird theme because number 7, you nailed it. I got the Arizona Cardinals.
There we go.
Great defense. They have all the tools on offense to continue to be an offensive powerhouse. They got the wide receivers. They got the tight ends. They have the head coach. They have the running backs that, they revived some careers over there in the running back position. They have everything to be successful. The thing is, do they have the work ethic to be successful? And that's going to be one of the things that follows them. And what I mean is Arizona must overcome all the distractions. Anytime Kyler throws an interception or they have a bad game, whether it's Kyler's fault or the team's fault, did they watch enough film? Did their head coach watch enough film? Did they game plan the right way? Did the head coach have the right game plan? Did Kyler have the right read? This, that. You had the Hopkins, the D-Hops suspension for the first handful of games. You have Hollywood Brown just getting arrested for whatever they call that out there in Arizona. I've never even heard of such a ruling on going 85 miles an hour. I don't know if New York has that, but apparently Arizona, that's a criminal speeding or however they refer to it as. So can they get over that hump of distractions, and can they get over that hump of hitting a wall late in the season and just dropping to the ground? That's why they're number 7 on my list. They could potentially be higher, but it's one of those things I need to see it to believe it. And happily, I will sit here at 7. And like you said, eat crow if it happens. I need to see it to believe it. Make me believe it. Cardinals, especially you, show me you're worthy of that $230 million contract, Kyler Murray, because I do believe you watch tape, but if you want to be the best, you got to watch more tape. And that's what it's going to come down to. That's a storyline you're going to hear all season long. Just like we talked about with the Patriots when the Patriots were in the Super Bowl that year. Did you know Chris Hogan used to play lacrosse? We're going to hear that all season long. Now, here's a guy that doesn't watch a lot of film. You all know who I'm referring to, Chris Collinsworth. You're going to hear that all season long. All season long. Can they overcome that distraction to be higher than number 7? Until I see it, I'm not believing it. That's why they're number 7.
Before we move on, and we will move on, let me ask you this, Zach. Take a quick look at your top 10. Of all the teams in the top 10, is the easiest team to question and to have hesitation about? It feels like the Cardinals, right? Like, it feels like if you were going to ask questions about one of these teams, or if one of these teams could maybe take even an inch of a step back, it'd be really easy to pile on. The Cardinals are that team, right? Like, it's not just going to barely trickle down. It feels like it's going to be an avalanche with these guys, doesn't it?
It very well could. And, here's the thing. It's all about how they start. Kyler Murray has always had the big-time weapons around him. He's had Christian Kirk, A.J. Green, DeAndre Hopkins. Now he's not going to have DeAndre Hopkins. Christian Kirk moved on to a new team. A.J. Green's getting another year older. Then you have potential suspension of Hollywood Brown coming. I don't think he ends up getting suspended because, even though it's called criminally speeding, I don't think that has enough effect on them to suspend him. But once again, if he were to prove it, now would be the time. Because if you take a look at the stats on whether he's targeting DeAndre Hopkins or the rest of the team, he clearly puts up better, stronger numbers when throwing to DeAndre Hopkins compared to the rest of the team.
Couldn't have said it better, so I won't try to. I think we'll move on, and I'll give you my next team up. This is where I have the Vikings. I don't really have a ton more to add after what you said about the Vikings, other than this. Coaches from the Sean McVay tree love themselves from Kirk Cousins. If you can get in the way back machine, really think about it. We're going to go to the way long ago of, like, Sean McVay with the Washington football Commander Redskins. Did a little bit of work with Kirk Cousins. Guys from that coaching tree love themselves from Kirk Cousins. He's got a coach who's going to be all in on him. When you join the Sean McVay coaching tree, you sign a blood oath to ride or die for Kirk Cousins. They're going to get to play the Lions and the Bears. What could go wrong? Vikings, my next team up. Zach, who do you got?
You know what? I couldn't agree with you more. What could go wrong when you have to face those two teams 4 times a year? This is a team that's destined to push the Packers. I don't know if they overcome the Packers in the North, but it's definitely a team to look out to push them to the brink of potentially the last handful of weeks of the season. Number 8, I have the Dallas Cowboys. And the reason that I have them so low is because, once again, every single year when you think they're supposed to do something well, they just end up breaking everybody's hearts. It's America's team. It's also America's heartbreak every single season. And for that reason, once again, I need to see it to believe it. And until Dak Prescott can show me that he's more than just a guy that controls a team and can actually put him on his back and help them win big games when needed, I'm not buying into Dak Prescott. Now, I do think he has the potential to be a top 10 quarterback. This is the year that he needs to prove it to me because he does not have everything perfect. He's dealt with injuries on the offensive line. Now, he's lost some pieces on the offensive line. He lost his number 1 wide receiver, the surefire Amari Cooper, everybody's favorite route runner, and Amari Cooper, one of the best route runners in the NFL. CeeDee Lamb has a case of the dropsies. Now he slides into that number 1 position. You have, Michael Gallup. Is he going to come back from injury and be Michael Gallup that had the potential to be a top tier number 2 or potentially a bottom tier number 1? And then James Washington. He just got injured. How long is he going to be out? How much is that going to affect the offense? And then Dalton Schultz at the tight end position. I do like Dalton Schultz, but I think they had better options out there in free agency in a draft than Dalton Schultz. He's a nice piece. He's a nice tight end, but ultimately I don't think he's going to do enough compared to the other tight ends in the league. So this is really going to come on Dak. Can he elevate Dalton Schultz play? Can he elevate CeeDee Lamb to be that number 1 wide receiver? And then Michael Gallup and James Washington, what can they be? Are they going to be healthy? When are they going to be healthy? When are they going to produce? And then obviously the last question mark is Zeke going to be healthy this year? And will they split? How much will they split with Tony Pollard going into a contract year, eligible for the extension? They're not really discussing anything with him yet. What kind of impact is that going to have on this team? Because I do believe Ezekiel Elliott dealt with injury last year. I do believe that's why he had a little bit of an off year. But can he come back healthy? Can he be in the quote-unquote best shape of his life? That remains to be seen. And then, like Ryan talked about, why they're number 3 on his list, the injuries, the penalties, the clock management, all those things come into question. And with all those things coming into question, that's why they're number 8 on my team. Because this is a list, the number 8 on my list. This is a team that was clearly head and shoulders better than the San Francisco 49ers. And it didn't even look like they exited the locker room. That's how poorly they played against the 49ers.
Zach, I like this. We're embracing debate here at Zach Harris Sports because you see those question marks and you see the glass as potentially half empty, and I see the glass as half full and full of a nice alcoholic beverage, which is why my number 9 team, in the spirit of glass half full, is a team that woke up this morning and they felt dangerous. They had 2 first round quarterbacks on their roster, albeit both from the same draft on their second team, having been run out of town with their previous teams. I want Panthers here. I got weird. I think the NFC is really top heavy and really weak at the bottom. If everything goes well in Carolina, and I mean everything, I mean McCaffrey stays healthy, Baker plays with the chip on his shoulder, they just eat up the Falcons. They beat up on a Saints team, which I could see kind of going either way. I almost considered them in this spot, but I'm a little bit weak on the Saints. Not wild about that team. I could have gone Saints here. I ended up going Panthers. I thought it'd be more fun for me to talk about, admittedly. And I think they're a more fun team. I'd rather talk about them. So I put them at 9. Maybe everything goes. Maybe Matt Rule becomes the guy that we thought he was going to be. Maybe Baker Mayfield looks like the guy that we thought he could have been. Maybe McCaffrey's healthy and they can somehow piece this thing together and threaten for a playoff spot. Like I said, I think the bottom half of the NFC is so weak that you could almost make an argument in your bottom 2 picks for like 6 teams. I happen to go with the Panthers. Zach, go ahead. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me who you have in engine number 9.
I'm going to actually tell you right now that I do not have the Carolina Panthers on my list. Too many questions. When you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. And that's something that I've been told. That's something I believe in. When you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. Number 9, I'm going to go with the Washington Commanders. And the reason I'm going with the Washington Commanders, because if everything goes right, if you get a decent Carson Wentz, whether it's the 2017 Carson Wentz or it's the Carson Wentz from 2019 where he led a bunch of garbage men and won 4 straight games on his way to the playoffs, where he took that nasty hit from behind in the back of the head and dealt with that concussion and ended his postseason game early. If they get a mixture of those 2, this team has the potential to not only make the playoffs, but the potential to compete for the NFC East with the Eagles and with the Dallas Cowboys. And it's predicated on 2 things. The defense not getting off to a slow start like they did last year, and Carson Wentz just being 25% better than Taylor Heineke. And that's not a personal shot at Taylor Heineke. He was drafted where he was drafted for a reason. He's jumped a couple of teams for a reason. He is a great backup. He is not a true starting quarterback. So if I could just get 25% better than Taylor Heineke, this Washington Commanders team is already ahead of where they were last year. So predicated on those 2 things. First of all, you do not need a slow start from your defense like they did last year, where they were letting everybody throw for over 300 yards on them. And then second of all, I just need Carson Wentz to be a tad better than Taylor Heineke, because they have some of the best weapons in the NFL, whether it's Antonio Gibson, whether it's scary Terry McLaurin, and now Dotson. They have tremendous amount of talent there. They just need a quarterback that's going to be able to get them the ball. And even though Carson Wentz does have his inconsistencies and he does have some ugly plays, if you look beyond those ugly plays, you could see a talented quarterback that, hey, you know, they very easily could have made the playoffs last year with the Colts. Everybody wants to point to those last 2 games of the season. Now, I'm not here to make excuses for anybody, but he did come off of COVID those last 2 weeks of the season. And if I wanted to point the finger at anyone, since everybody in the Colts like to point fingers, I could say what happened in the Ravens game, where you let a guy that supposedly can't throw the ball when he's behind, you know, come back and complete for over 80% of his passes on you and complete a comeback from double digits in the 4th quarter. Maybe that blew your playoff chances. If you just would have won that game, you wouldn't have needed a game against Jacksonville. You know, so everybody wants to point the blame at Carson Wentz, but if you take out those last 2 games of the season where he dealt with COVID, where he didn't really practice going into that Raiders game, and then he dealt with the shit end of the stick against the Jaguars, where the run game wasn't working and neither was Carson Wentz. You know, you take a look at the rest of those seasons, rest of those games of the season, even with the dual ankle sprains, he really had a very solid season, a better season than Taylor Heineke. And at the end of the day, that's what they need.
Zach, as we come to the close of our power rankings, I find us at a bit of a crossroads. There are so many different teams I considered here at the number 10 spot. The New Orleans Saints still have Alvin Kamara. We're going to figure out what Jameis Winston can do if he can stay healthy. They are an organization in flux a little bit. They're bringing in a new head coach. We'll see what they can do. I consider them. I spent all of, I dare I say, an entire minute looking at the Chicago Bears. Got rid of Matt Nagy. New head coach and Matt Eberflus, which is it's fun to say. We're going to see, can Justin Fields take a step forward? Consider them briefly. Never once considered Seattle or New York. Not really much to talk about there. Didn't consider Atlanta. I ended up settling on the Commanders for all the reasons you just said. When you take a look, let's remove last season. Boom, non-factor. The year before, that Washington football team defense was so good. It was so good, and Chase Young was like the dude. So if they can try to recapture some of that, put Carson Wentz in a situation where he's supported and his drug addict owner isn't coming down to scream at him because he's busily fondling his employees. Throwing a little bit of shade there, but it's not wrong. I think they have the potential to be something. Maybe sneak into the playoffs and be that team when we look over our playoff matchups week 1 and go, hey, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be home by now. I'm actually going number 10 Commanders. It's not a team I'm happy to have at number 10, but, you know, when it's 2 a.m. and they call last call, you take home whatever you can, and I guess I'm taking home the Commanders. Zach, who rounds out your list?
This one was easy for me because I wanted to put them higher because they have a Super Bowl caliber defense. I'm talking about the New Orleans Saints. Now, the biggest question mark is Jameis Winston. What is he going to be? Now, obviously, they ended up giving a promotion inside of the organization to head coach. They're going to have a lot of kind of rumors swirling around him with the Drew Brees. Is he going to come back? You know, this is probably one of the more talented teams of the Saints have had in forever. You know, since Drew Brees has been there the last handful of years. This team is probably the most talented. They're also going to have to deal with all the distractions of the Sean Payton, Miami Dolphins crap, even though it has nothing to do with the players in that organization and more with Sean Payton. I'm afraid that they're going to get some questions throughout the season, and it may linger throughout the whole season. But at the end of the day, this is a Super Bowl caliber defense. They're getting Michael Thomas back finally. They got Jarvis Landry, the juice. Now, I don't know if Alvin Kamara is going to get suspended or not. I think he should get suspended for a handful of games. I'm just not quite sure how the NFL is going to come down with that because clearly they got a bunch of other stuff going on their plate as well as the Alvin Kamara situation. But at the end of the day, this is probably one of the most talented defenses in the league. They got a good offensive line. They got great weapons at the wide receiver position. They got Alvin Kamara at the running back position, depending on how many games he gets suspended for. It's just what is going to be the answer at the quarterback position. This is a team I could rank so much higher because they are a Super Bowl caliber defense. I just don't know if their offense is going to be able to even remotely match what their defense can bring.
Zach, you hit up on all the points that I think are worth hitting up about the Saints. I am a little bit more pessimistic about some of these questions they have. I am well past the point in my life where I'm going to try to prognosticate what the NFL is going to decide to do suspension-wise. Honestly, I think they spin a wheel in a back room. Whatever it lands on, that's the number. That's the depth of the research we're going to go to. So Kamara could get a few games. Heck, you get a full season. I don't know. What's the wheel going to land on? I'm not doing that anymore. Here's my question when it comes to the Saints. How much of that culture, that Sean Payton developed in New Orleans, right? Because they were not a winning culture before he got there. Some of you listening might be too young to remember this, but there is a point where the Saints were a bit of a joke, right? They were our Jaguars, if you can believe that, before Drew Brees and Sean Payton got to town. Let's see what they do now that he's gone and shopping for homes in Miami. I'm not wild about the Saints. They put such a good defense, but there's so many questions on offense. I had too many questions about them, and they didn't make my list because the Panthers were more fun for me to talk about. Zach, any honorable mentions you want to touch on before we move this puppy along?
Honestly, no, because those 10 teams are my 10 teams. I don't think anybody's really going to slide in there. Maybe the only question that I have is potentially, how much of an impact can Brian Dable make with the Giants? Can they slide into that 10 spot? So I guess they'll be my honorable mention. But other than that, there's so many questions revolving around these other teams. And if Daniel Jones can just be 50% better than what he was last year, this is a team that maybe earned some sort of respect. And you know what? To be a number 10 spot, you don't need to even make the playoffs. You could just be a 10 spot. So I don't think the Giants ultimately make the playoffs on any level. Even if everything does go right for them, I still don't see them as a playoff team. But they could potentially, when all is said and done at the end of the year, be in that number 10 spot for quote unquote Super Bowl contenders or NFC power rankings, as we like to talk about it.
When you look at the NFC, it's, you could say, could the Giants sneak their way into a top 10, which would honestly probably throughout the whole NFL make them a number 20 team? Yeah, okay, sure, maybe. It's, man, the NFC kind of sucks.
You know what? You said
I mean this in the best possible way, but like
team,
when we looked at the AFC, there were so many different arguments you could have made. Maybe, right? If everything went well, and then what we have. If everything went well, you know what happens? It doesn't matter how Daniel Jones plays. We're stuck with the kid, and then this is our guy because he lucked into it one time. Man, what a nightmare that would be. I would hate that. I would be so miserable.
He does just enough to show that he deserves an extension, because where are you going to find somebody that's better than Daniel Jones? Because now you're drafting in the 20s instead of the top 10 or whatever the case may be. You're not bad enough to get one of these top 4 quarterbacks in the NFL draft, but you're not quite good enough to make the playoffs. You're kind of stuck in that road of what do we do? Do we take Daniel Jones off the roster because we need to give him a new contract, or we just say, you know what, screw it. Next year we're going to go in with Tyrod Taylor as our quarterback, let pieces fall, and then we'll worry about a quarterback coming in the following year draft. That's basically giving up on a whole year, and I don't see the Giants doing that. Now, we do have 2 more topics that we were going to discuss. I'm not really going to touch on the Cleveland Browns situation that much because things are still ever evolving. What we thought would be a 6-game suspension, whether you agree with it, if it was too short, too long, whatever the case may be, it's still ever evolving. The NFL goes ahead and they are appealing that suspension. They want longer. They want the indefinite suspension for at least a year, if not leaking into 2 years. That is the rumors falling around there. So we're really not going to discuss the Browns' outlook for the season, but I'll just tell you right now, if Deshaun's suspended 6 games, I think this team can stay afloat, 3-3, 4-2, depending on how heavily they lean on the run game. If he's suspended for the whole season, forget about it. This isn't a playoff team. Even with as talented as they are, Jacoby Brissett is a backup for a reason. While he can win you a handful of games, while you win 6, 7, maybe 8 games, that's not going to be enough in a tough AFC where it looks like 4 teams in one conference could make the playoff, or one division could make the playoffs. So it's going to be tough for them in that perspective. Do you have anything to add on that real quick?
Just to keep it short and sweet, I won't work you through the entire schedule. If things stand as they do now, if you're so inclined, take a look at the first 6 games the Browns play, and you tell me whether or not Jacoby Brissett keep this ship afloat. 6 games, think of it what you will, but those first 6 games, got a lot of winnable games. I think they could stem the tide long enough to be a dangerous playoff team, and that's as much as that situation as I think I want to touch. And we're a positive show, Zach. We don't like to have negative conversations. We'll keep it positive. Jacoby Brissett, good enough.
Although I am going to touch on something negative real quick, the Miami Dolphins losing a first round and a third round pick. There's only been 3 such incidences where an organization has won a first round pick. You know what all 3 incidents have in common? You guessed it, Tom Brady. We're talking Deflategate, we're talking Spygate, and now we're talking Tom Brady Dolphins Gate. Those are the 3 incidences where a first round pick was lost by an organization. Real quickly, I just want to touch on it. What they did was wrong. The illegal tampering, talking through a close personal friend of Tom Brady about, we all knew he was going to leave the Patriots at some point. We didn't want to believe it, but we knew it could happen, that he wanted to prove himself outside of the Patriots organization. And while I don't agree with what the Dolphins did, if I was in that situation, if you had the potential to add one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, you had a solid defense, you had a solid special teams, you had the pieces to add around him on the offensive side of the ball. Because remember, they had all those draft picks that they could add pieces around Tom Brady if necessary, if they ended up getting him. And then having potentially Sean Payton come in and be your head coach. And that would be the greatest offensive mind that Tom Brady would have ever had to have on his team. That's worth the risk. Unfortunately, they got caught. They got their hands caught in a cookie jar a little too early. You can't have that cookie until after supper. You can't talk to Tom Brady until after that contract ends. They got caught with their hands in a cookie jar, and that's all I really want to say about that.
Zach, I disagree. I actually think this is a really positive topic to cover because it involves clowns, and everybody loves clowns. So my slant on this is that Stephen Ross is the biggest clown of at least the past week. And here's why. He tampered for Tom Brady. He tried to tamper for Sean Payton. Wound up with neither. Man, you cheated and got neither. You got slapped around with the punishment. You lost picks. And you have to look that locker room in the eye when your suspension is over and go, I believe in this team. I believe in this coach. I believe in our quarterback. And I did everything I could to cheat and try to replace them. Oh, interesting. As it stands with this Dolphins team, they're starting to get into clown show territory, right? Like, for all the shade that we've thrown Arizona's way, this team feels like another team where there's just so much off the field nonsense, and I'm over it. Stephen Ross, you big old idiot. What are you doing? Like, if you're gonna tamper for Tom Brady, like, if you're gonna cheat, cheat. Don't half cheat. You can't get half pregnant. If you're going to tamper, tamper. Like, when you could have had Tom Brady, just cheat a little harder. I think that's a player worth cheating over. If you were going to cheat over anybody, go all the way. Now you're stuck. You're going to go in there. You're going to have to face Tua. You're going to have to face all the members of Tuanon. And I think this is a conversation as far as Tom Brady and the Miami Dolphins that in a few months we're going to get stuck in the position revisiting.
Honestly, I think this worked out.
So for now, I'll say you're winning a Super Bowl Tom Brady window. I think if you're the Dolphins, is closed. Oh, yeah, for certain. Right? Like, I don't think I'd want to play for this Joker. And I don't think the roster would have been as good as the Bucks.
I agree 100%. And I think with the Buccaneers, one of the things we need to talk about is, if you played in the AFC East, you got to go against Josh Allen twice. You got to go against Bill Belichick twice, who you know very well, and he knows you very well. That's going to be a chess match anytime you go against them. And then the Jets, will just throw the Jets in there. And then you take a look at what he has to go through now. You get Jameis Winston twice a year. You get Marcus Mariota twice a year. You get, I don't know, name your starter for that particular week twice a year. So I think ultimately it worked out perfect for Tom Brady. Obviously, if you know the rules of what exactly happened, is if Tom Brady reaches out to the Dolphins first, the Dolphins are required to discuss it with the NFL. And if the Dolphins reach out to Tom Brady first, then that's tampering. So you can't really have player tampering. You can only have it in the sense of the fact that the Dolphins would potentially be in trouble if they did not report that Tom Brady reached out to them first without his contract ending. But other than that, the player would never get in trouble in that particular instance. And it's not just because it's Tom Brady, it's because how it's designed in that specific rule.
Zach, we are getting ready to wrap up the show here. Before we do, I'll just pose you one question. Simple yes or no. Stephen Ross, is he a top 3 bad owner in the NFL?
Yes, 100%. I think he is. I mean, there are other bad owners, but I do think he is top up there on the top of my head. Anytime you know an owner's name, it's either for really good reasons or really bad reasons. In this particular moment, it's a really bad reason because if you wanted me to go around and name every single owner of every single NFL team, I'll tell you right now, I may be able to name the backup quarterbacks for all the teams. I cannot name all the owners for the NFL.
Zach, I agree. I think we've said all worth saying about this Dolphins team, at least for the time being. Me personally, with everything that's gone on in the NFL this week, I can't wait to talk about the actual games, man. I would love nothing more than to stop talking about this off the field nonsense.
Well, good news for you, Ryan. We do have the preseason game that starts in less than 24 hours from now. So next Wednesday, we're going to talk about it. How good did the starters look, if they even played more than a snap, and how good did the backups look? And then how quickly did we realize that we're over the game already? Because as quickly as it comes up and as much as we missed it, it becomes a shit show about 2 quarters in and you're done with it.
Yeah, everybody listening, we'll play a little game next week. I want you to write down what time you stopped watching. How far did you make it into the first preseason game before you realized maybe preseason football wasn't a good enough fix for you to get by on? That's your homework for next week. We will see you then. This is Zach Harris Sports. I've been Ryan. Thank you so much for listening, whoever you may be listening. We do live stream the show on Twitch. You can find us on Facebook, Zach Harris Sports on Twitter, on iHeartRadio. This isn't the only project Zach Harris has. You can also find clips from the radio show online. Please give it a listen. Zach doesn't just talk about football. He does talk about all sports. Please give it a listen. Enjoy the show. Thank you so much.
Appreciate y'all. Have a good night.
Much for listening. Zach, go ahead. You're the name in the title. Show us out.
Enjoy y'all listening. Appreciate you. Enjoy some football, at least for the first quarter tomorrow, and then tune in next Wednesday at 9 p.m. We'll be back. Enjoy your night.